A routine mission. Zara Vance, Galactic Mercenary. The title had a nice ring to it, if you ignored the long sleepless nights, close brushes with death, and countless scars, both physical and mental. But hey, it paid the bills. And there was never a shortage of work for someone with her skills in this messed-up galaxy. Zara tossed back another swig of the vile concoction, the seedy bar deemed whiskey, and checked her comm unit. Still no word from her latest client. She drummed her fingers impatiently, ignoring the reproachful looks from the other patrons annoyed by her display of sobriety. Just as Zara was considering calling it a night, her comm crackled to life. She tapped her earpiece. "Vance here. You're late." "Apologies, Ms. Vance," came the heavily disguised voice on the other end. "We had to take extra precautions, given the sensitive nature of this job." Zara rolled her eyes. "They always said that. I'm listening. We need you to rescue a group of children from the Korgans on Zeta Minor. The details are being transmitted now." Zara's eyebrows shot up as she reviewed the info on her datapad. The Korgans, nasty pieces of work, your typical conquer the galaxy types. But child abduction, that was a new low, even for them. "These your kids?" she asked, scanning the profiles of about a dozen solemn-faced children. "Our affiliates' children, yes. The Korgans seem to be targeting youth for their latest scheme. We want them recovered safely, as soon as possible." Zara frowned. Something felt off here. Since when did shady affiliates care this much about their brats? But she knew better than to pry. "Safer that way. I'll need half up front, plus a bonus if any Korgans need removing." "Done. Just bring the children back safely, Ms. Vance. We're counting on you." The line went dead, and Zara downed the last of her drink. Rescuing kids from alien trash, all in a day's work. She just hoped this mission would go smoother than the last one. Her cybernetic legs still twinged when she recalled that particular disaster. After settling her tab, and a few curious stares with her best, "Don't mess with me" glare, Zara headed to the spaceport. She smirked in satisfaction at the sight of her ship, the Nova Blitz. A bit rough around the edges, not unlike its pilot, but she'd gotten Zara through more scrapes than she could count. She ran a loving hand along the hull before climbing aboard, her thoughts already light years ahead. The Korgans had taken over an abandoned outpost on Zeta Minor a few cycles back, mostly kept to themselves from the limited intel available. Guess now she knew why. Slipping into the pilot's seat, Zara fired up the controls and plugged in the coordinates. The stars blurred into streaks of light as the Nova Blitz leaped into hyperdrive, hurtling its lone occupant toward an unknown fate. Zara stretched out in her seat, the hum of the ship lulling her into a light doze. Catch some shut-eyed while she could. Once boots hit dirt, it would be go time. Sometime later, a shrill beeping jerked Zara out of a rather pleasant dream involving those Hygran dancers from a few ports back. She groaned and slapped the console, silencing the proximity alert. The swirling chaos of hyperspace had dissolved into a rather striking view of Zeta Minor, all craggy gray rock interspersed with vivid purple vegetation. Under different circumstances, Zara might have even called it pretty, but the harsh geometric structures marring the landscape quickly dispelled that notion. "All right, Blitz, let's get this over with." Zara guided her ship down to the planet's surface, aiming for a landing spot a few clicks from the Korgan compound. No point announcing her arrival. Slipping into a black reinforced pressure suit that clung to her athletic figure like a second skin, Zara armed up. Blasters, a few flash grenades, vibroblade, lockpick kit, the essentials. She hesitated briefly before grabbing a small med pack. Never knew with kids. By the time Zara crept up to the compound, night had fallen, casting everything in deep shades of indigo. She frowned at the lack of visible guards. Cocky bastards. Guess they thought their reputation was enough to deter anyone from messing with them. Zara smirked. Their mistake. She made quick work of the rudimentary lock, slipping inside on silent feet. The hallways were empty. Zara's frown deepened. Something wasn't right here. Where was everyone? The building was a labyrinth of stark corridors, but Zara methodically cleared each room, ignoring the growing sense of unease prickling at the back of her neck. It was almost too easy. Finally, she hit pay dirt. At the end of a long hallway stood an imposing metal door, out of place with the utilitarianism of the rest of the compound. Zara fired up her bypass tool and got to work. Several tense minutes later, the door clicked open with a reluctant hiss. Gun at the ready, Zara stepped inside and froze. The room was filled with children, the same ones from her briefing. But instead of looking terrified or relieved, they simply stared at her with eerily calm gazes. No chains, no guards, nothing keeping them in place. What the hell? Hey there, Zara said uncertainly, lowering her blaster slightly. I'm here to get you out. Your friends sent me. The children continued to stare, unblinking, unmoving. Zara fought down a shudder. Seriously, what was up with these kids? She took a cautious step forward, reaching out a hand. That's when all hell broke loose. Pain like she'd never known exploded behind Zora's eyes, whiting out her vision. She dropped to her knees with a strangled gasp, clutching her head. It was like shards of glass were driving into her brain. Through watering eyes, she squinted at the children. They hadn't moved, but something in their expressions had shifted. A sort of grim satisfaction that looked utterly alien on those young faces. Whoa, what? Zara choked out through gritted teeth. And then, as suddenly as it started, the pain vanished. Zara collapsed forward, gulping air like she'd just run a marathon. She tried to push up, but her arms wouldn't obey. What had those little monsters done to her? Not monsters. The future. The voice that rang out was utterly devoid of inflection. Zara rolled over to see one of the older boys regarding her with cold eyes. Eyes that held a terrifying intelligence far beyond his years. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Mercenary, the boy continued. But you will. Soon. Well, shit. Zara thought to herself as unconsciousness rose up to claim her. This was so not in the contract. The children's secret. Zara came to with a pounding headache and the uncomfortable realization that she was tied to a chair. Well, this was embarrassing. Captured by a bunch of brats barely out of diapers, she tested her bonds, but they held fast. Whoever had tied these knew their knots. Blinking away the last of the grogginess, Zara took in her surroundings. Looked like some kind of laboratory, all gleaming metal surfaces and complicated equipment. And standing in front of her, regarding her with that same unnerving calm, were the children. So, you want to tell me what the hell is going on here? Zara demanded, aiming for bravado. Because last I checked, kidnapping is illegal in at least 12 systems. As is invading private property and assaulting minors, retorted the boy who had spoken before. Up close, Zara could see a hardness in his eyes that didn't belong on a child's face. What had these kids been through? Pretty sure self-defense negates that, Zara shot back. Especially when said minors drop you with some kind of freaky mind voodoo. That earned her a flicker of something across the boy's face. Surprise, maybe even respect. You're smarter than the usual mercenaries they send, he said. Most don't even realize what hit them. Yeah, well, I'm not your usual mercenary, Zara said. Now you want to tell me what a bunch of kids are doing in a Korgan facility, because I'm guessing you're not here for the room service. The boy exchanged glances with a few of the other children. Some unspoken communication seemed to pass between them. Finally, he turned back to Zara. We're weapons, he said simply. Zara stared. Come again. The Korgans, they changed us, experimented on us, gave us these abilities. The boy's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like he was reciting a history lesson, not describing a violation of the worst kind. Zara felt sick. She'd seen some messed up things in her line of work, but this was a whole new level of twisted. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. No one should have to go through that, least of all kids. But if you have these powers, why not use them to escape? We are. It was a girl who spoke this time, maybe 11 or 12. Her dark eyes held a depth of sorrow that made Zora's heart clench. Just not in the way you think. The Korgans want to use us to conquer, to destroy, the boy picked up. But that's not what we want. We're going to take them down from the inside. Zora's eyebrows shot up. You're going to take down the Korgans. By yourselves. We're stronger than we look, the boy said with a grim smile. And they don't suspect a thing. To them, we're just tools to be used. They don't realize we have minds of our own. Okay, color me impressed, Zora said. But where do I come into this? Why not just let me go if you didn't want to be rescued? The children exchanged another one of those looks. We need your help, the boy admitted. There's only so much we can do from in here. We need someone on the outside. Whoa, hold up, Zora said. I'm a mercenary, not a revolutionary. I don't get mixed up in political messes. You think this is just politics. The boy's eyes flashed. This is about survival. Ours and the galaxy's. If the Korgans succeed with their plan, no one will be safe. Not even tough-as-nails mercs. Zora chewed on the inside of her cheek. The kid had a point. The Korgans were bad news on a good day, but with an army of super-powered child soldiers. That was the stuff of nightmares. Say I do help you, she said slowly. What's the plan? Because I'm not seeing a lot of options here. You let us worry about the plan, the boy said. We just need you to be ready when the time comes. And to trust us, even if it looks bad. Trust you. The creepy mind control kids who just knocked me out and tied me up. Zara snorted. Yeah, sure, why not add that to the list of questionable life choices I've made? To her surprise, that actually got a small smile out of the boy. We'll untie you now, but you have to promise not to try anything. Cross my heart and hope to die, Zora sing-songed. At the kid's blank looks, she sighed. Yep, I promise, no funny business. The ropes fell away and Zora stood, rubbing her wrists. The children backed up warily, watching her with expectant gazes. Well, this has been a real treat, Zora said, edging towards the door. But I think it's time for me to be hitting the old dusty trail, so... She made it all of 2 steps before an invisible force rooted her feet to the floor. So much for that plan. Please, the boy said, and damn if there wasn't a note of actual pleading in his voice. I'm asking you to help us. Not because we'll force you, but because it's the right thing to do. You know it is. Zara closed her eyes briefly, damn her bleeding heart. She was going to regret this, she just knew it. All right, fine. She bit out. I'm in. But if we're going to be working together, I at least need something to call you. I can't just keep thinking of you as the boy. He blinked, like the concept of a name hadn't occurred to him. Then, slowly, Jace. You can call me Jace. Jace, Zara repeated. All right then, Jace. Let's bring these Korgan bastards down. Unlikely alliance. Days turned into weeks as Zara found herself falling into an uneasy routine at the Korgan facility. She still wasn't clear on all the details of Jace and the other children's grand plan, but she played her part, acting as their eyes and ears on the outside connected scum. So Zara bided her time, gathering what intel she could and smuggling it back to the kids. It was during one of these covert exchanges that the other shoe finally dropped. They're accelerating the timeline, Jace said without preamble as Zara slipped into the hidden room they used for their meetings. His face was even paler than usual, making the dark circles under his eyes stand out in stark relief. We just found out they're planning to move us to a new facility at the end of the week. Zara frowned. Move you where? We don't know, piped up a small girl named Asha. She'd been one of the first to warm up to Zara, and now clung to her like a barnacle at every opportunity. But we heard them saying something about final conditioning. That can't be good. A chill ran down Zora's spine. Final conditioning. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that meant. The Korgans were done playing around. They were ready to unleash their new weapons on the unsuspecting galaxy. Okay, so we move up our own timeline, Zara said, injecting a confidence into her voice that she didn't quite feel. We hit them hard and fast, before they have a chance to ship you out. Jace shook his head. It's not that simple. We're not ready. We still don't have access to the main control room, and without that. So we get creative, Zara interrupted. You kids are the most powerful psychics I've ever seen. Surely you can come up with something. Jace's mouth tightened. Our powers aren't infinite, Zara, and every time we use them, it gets a little harder to hide from the Korgans if we try something big and fail. He didn't need to finish. They all knew the stakes. Failure wasn't an option, not with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Zara ran a hand through her hair, frustration bubbling up in her chest. She was a soldier, not a strategist. Give her a gun and a target, and she was golden. But this was way above her pay grade. As if sensing her thoughts, Asha tugged on her sleeve. What if we caused a distraction? The girl asked, her dark eyes wide and earnest. Something to lure the guards away from the control room. Zara's brow furrowed. Like what? Asha shrugged her thin shoulders. I don't know. An explosion, maybe. Don't you mercs always carry bombs and stuff? Despite the gravity of the situation, Zara barked out a laugh. First of all, they're called explosive devices. And second, I usually try to avoid using them indoors. Too messy. But even as the words left her mouth, an idea began to form. Maybe not an explosion, per se, but something almost as attention-grabbing. She turned to Jace, a slow grin spreading across her face. How do you feel about a prison riot? The plan, such as it was, came together quickly after that. Zara would instigate a brawl in the mess hall during the next shift change, drawing the guards away from their posts. Meanwhile, Jace and the others would use their powers to slip into the control room and do whatever it was they needed to do. Zara still wasn't clear on that part, but she'd learned to roll with the psychic punches. When the appointed time came, Zara was ready. She'd spent the last few days carefully needling the most hot-headed of the Korgan guards, a hulking brute named Thrak. It hadn't been hard. Thrak was the type who took offense at everything from the way you breathed to the color of your socks. So when Zara accidentally bumped into him in the crowded mess hall, sending his tray of gelatinous nutrient cubes splattering across the floor, Thrak reacted exactly as she'd hoped. With a roar of rage, the Korgan seized Zara by the front of her shirt, lifting her bodily off the ground. You dare disrespect me, human filth. He snarled, his fetid breath washing over her face. Zara grinned. Disrespect? Nah, that would be doing this. And she promptly introduced her forehead to Thrak's nose with a sickening crunch. The Korgan howled, dropping Zara to clutch at his gushing face. She hit the ground rolling, coming up with her fists raised and a manic gleam in her eye. Come on, big boy, she taunted. Show me what you got. What happened next was a blur of flying fists, smashed furniture, and more than a few creative expletives in a variety of languages. Zara gave as good as she got, but her main goal was to keep the fight going as long as possible. It worked. Within minutes, the mess hall was a seething mass of brawling bodies as Korgans and humans alike joined the fray. The guards, overwhelmed and underprepared, could do little but try to contain the chaos. Zara caught a glimpse of Jace and the others slipping out amidst the confusion, their small forms hugging the walls as they made their way towards the control room. Good. All she had to do was keep this up a little while longer. And that's when Thrak, blood streaming from his shattered nose, came barreling towards her with murder in his eyes and a wickedly curved blade in his hand. Zara had just enough time to think that this was going to hurt before the Korgan was on her, the knife slicing towards her unprotected throat. She threw up an arm to block, felt the blade bite deep into her flesh, a scream building up in her lungs. And then Thrak froze, his eyes going wide and glassy. He stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, before crumpling to the ground in a boneless heap. Zara stared, shock temporarily overriding the burning pain in her arm. That was Jace's handiwork. She was sure of it. The boy had just saved her life. All around her, the other Korgans were dropping like puppets with their strings cut. Within seconds, the mess hall was silent save for the moans of the wounded and the occasional sizzle of shorted-out electronics. Slowly, Zara pushed herself to her feet, cradling her injured arm against her chest. She had to find Jace and the others, had to make sure they were all right. The sound of running footsteps had her whirling, reaching for a blaster that wasn't there. But it was Asha who burst into the room, her face alight with a fierce, triumphant joy. "We did it," the girl crowed, throwing herself at Zara in an exuberant hug. "The control room is ours. The facility is on lockdown. We're free. Free." The word hit Zara like a physical blow. They were free. These incredible, impossible children were free. And the galaxy would never be the same. End of part 3. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. Let me know if you'd like me to continue on to part 4. I'm having a great time crafting this tale while keeping the content engaging but appropriate. The tide turns. Zara couldn't remember the last time she'd been hugged. Probably never, come to think of it. Mercs didn't really go in for that touchy-feely stuff. But as Asha clung to her, thin arms wrapped around her waist in a surprisingly strong grip, Zara found herself returning the embrace with her one good arm. "Yeah, we did good, kid," she murmured, her voice a little rougher than usual. "Real good." The moment was broken by Jace's arrival, the boy skidding into the room with a harried expression on his face. "We need to move," he said without preamble. "I've locked down the facility, but it won't take them long to override the system. We have to be gone before they do." Zara nodded, gently untangling herself from Asha. "Agreed. Let's blow this popsicle stand." They made their way through the eerily silent halls, stepping over the unconscious bodies of Korgans. Zara's arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through. She'd had worse. As they neared the hangar where Zara's ship was docked, the first signs of trouble began to appear. Distant shouts, the pounding of running feet. The Korgans were starting to regroup. Jace's face tightened. "They're coming. We need to hurry." But even as he spoke, a group of armed Korgans rounded the corner ahead, blocking their path. Zara reacted on instinct, shoving the children behind her and reaching for her blaster, only to remember she didn't have it. It had been confiscated when she first arrived. The Korgans advanced, weapons raised. "Surrender the abominations," their leader snarled, "and your death will be quick, human." Zara bared her teeth in a feral grin. "See, you really shouldn't have said that." And then all hell broke loose. The children surged forward as one, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The Korgans fired, but their blaster bolts stopped midair, hovering like angry wasps before reversing direction and slamming back into their shooters. Screams filled the air as the Korgans fell, clutching at smoking holes in their armor. But Zara had no time to gawk. More were coming, drawn by the sound of fighting. They had to get out of here now. "The ship," she yelled, herding the children towards the hangar. "Move, move, move." They ran, Zara bringing up the rear, her injured arm tucked close to her body. Blaster fire zipped past her head, singing her hair. She ducked and weaved, using every bit of skill and experience she had to avoid being hit. And then, miracle of miracles, they were there. The Nova Blitz sat in the middle of the hangar, a beautiful sight for sore eyes. Zara hit the remote entry, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. "Everyone in," she ordered, waving the children aboard. They scrambled up the ramp, Asha clinging to Jace's hand. But Jace paused at the top, looking back at Zara. "What about you?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Zara glanced over her shoulder. The Korgans were closing in, their faces twisted with rage. She knew she couldn't outrun them, not with her injury slowing her down. but maybe she could buy the kids some time. "I'll be right behind you," she said, infusing her voice with a confidence she didn't feel. "Get the ship prepped for takeoff." Jace hesitated, but another volley of blaster fire made the decision for him. He nodded once, sharply, and disappeared into the ship. Zara turned to face the oncoming horde, a grim smile playing about her lips. "All right, you bastards," she muttered. "Let's dance." She charged forward, a wordless battle cry tearing from her throat. The Korgans faltered, momentarily taken aback by the sheer audacity of a single human rushing towards them. That hesitation cost them. Zara was among them before they could react, lashing out with fists and feet and every dirty trick she'd ever learned. Bones crunched and Korgans howled as she laid into them with a berserker's fury, her pain and exhaustion forgotten in the heat of battle. But it couldn't last. A lucky shot caught her in the side, spinning her around. Another burned across her thigh, sending her to one knee. Zara grimaced, tasting blood on her lips. This was it. This was how she died. She looked up at the Korgan looming over her, his blaster leveled at her head, saw his finger tighten on the trigger, and then the world exploded. A shockwave of pure psychic energy slammed into the Korgans, flinging them like ragdolls. Zara flattened herself to the ground, covering her head with her arms as debris rained down around her. When the ringing in her ears finally subsided, she raised her head cautiously. The Korgans lay still, their armor smoking, and standing at the bottom of the Nova Blitz's ramp, hand outstretched and eyes blazing, was Jace. "I told you to prep the ship," Zara said weakly as the boy approached. Jace shrugged, a small smile playing about his lips. "I decided you needed my help more." He reached down, offering his hand. After a moment, Zara took it, allowing him to help her to her feet. Together, leaning on each other for support, they limped up the ramp and into the waiting ship. As the Nova Blitz blasted out of the hangar and into the starry void beyond, Zara collapsed into the pilot's seat with a groan. Asha was at her side in an instant, a med kit clutched in her small hands. "We should get you to a doctor," the girl said as she carefully cleaned and bandaged Zara's wounds. Zara shook her head. "No time. We have to get you kids somewhere safe before the Korgans regroup and come after us." "Where will we go?" It was one of the younger boys, his voice small and frightened. "We don't have a home anymore." Zara's heart clenched. He was right. These children had been through hell, had their very identities stripped away. They had nothing and no one, except each other. And her. "Yes, you do," she said firmly, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "You have me. And I promise I will find you a home. Somewhere no one will ever hurt you again." She meant it, with every fiber of her being. She didn't know how, but she would make it happen. These kids deserved that much. As the ship hurtled through the stars, the children gathered around, some dozing off in their seats, others simply staring out at the infinite cosmos. Jace slipped into the co-pilot's chair, his eyes heavy, but his smile genuine. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." Zara reached over, ruffling his hair gently. "Anytime, kid. Anytime." And she meant that too. Come hell or high water, she would be there for these children. They were her mission now. The final stand. They ran. Through the twisting corridors of the Nova Blitz, Zara led her ragtag band of psychic children, her injury forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. The ship shuddered around them, the hull groaning under the onslaught of the Korgan pursuers. "We can't outrun them forever," Jace panted, his face pale but determined. "Their ships are faster, and they outnumber us." Zara grimaced, knowing he was right. The Nova Blitz was a tough old bird, but she was no warship. They needed a plan, and fast. "We have to fight," she said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. She'd hoped to spare the children more violence, but the universe seemed to have other ideas. To her surprise, Jace nodded, a grim smile playing about his lips. "We're ready." And looking at the determined faces around her, The set of small shoulders and the steel in young eyes, Zara realized he was right. These kids had been through hell, had seen and suffered things no child should, but they had also found strength in each other and in themselves. They were warriors, one and all. "All right then," Zara said, a matching smile spreading across her face. "Let's show these Korgan bastards what we're made of." They made their stand in the cargo hold, the largest open space on the ship. Zara and the older children took up positions behind crates and barrels, makeshift barricades against the coming storm. The younger ones huddled in the center, protected on all sides. They didn't have to wait long. With a screech of tortured metal, the outer doors blew inward, admitting a horde of snarling Korgans. Blaster fire filled the air, red and green bolts crisscrossing in a deadly light show. Zara returned fire, her shots precise and economical. Beside her, the children unleashed their own brand of hell. Psychic energy crackled and surged, slamming Korgans back, crushing them against walls, turning their own weapons against them. But for every Korgan that fell, two more seemed to take their place. They poured into the hold like a never-ending tide, heedless of their losses, driven by a single-minded rage. Zara cried out as a bolt seared across her ribs, the smell of burnt flesh filling her nostrils. She staggered, her gun dropping from nerveless fingers. And in that moment, the Korgans surged forward, sensing weakness. They closed in, a wall of snarling, vindictive fury. Zara braced herself, preparing for the end. But it never came. A wall of shimmering iridescent light sprang up between her and the Korgans, a barrier of pure psychic energy. The Korgans slammed into it and were hurled back, their howls of rage turning to shrieks of pain. Zara turned, her eyes widening. The children stood in a circle, hands linked, faces upturned. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, their hair stirring in an unseen wind. And in the center of the circle, floating a few inches above the ground, was Asha. The girl's face was serene, her eyes closed. She seemed almost to be listening to some unheard melody. And as Zara watched, awestruck, tendrils of light began to emanate from the child, weaving and dancing through the air. They touched each of the other children in turn, and where they touched, wounds healed. Exhaustion fled. Eyes opened, clear and bright, and filled with a fierce, unwavering determination. And then Asha spoke, her voice ringing through the hold with a clarity and power that belied her small frame. "You will not have us," she said, and it was not just Asha speaking, but all of them, a chorus of young voices raised in defiance. "We are not your weapons. We are not your tools. We are children of the stars, and we are free." With each word, the light grew brighter, the psychic barrier stronger. The Korgans fell back, their armor smoking, their skin blistering. And then, with a final brilliant flash, the light exploded outward. When Zara's vision cleared, blinking away spots, the Korgans were gone. Not dead, she realized with a start, but simply gone. Vanished, as if they had never been. Slowly, hardly daring to breathe, Zara got to her feet. The children were stirring, looking around with wide, wondering eyes. Asha lay crumpled on the floor, her small chest rising and falling with the slow, even breaths of deep sleep. Jace knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentleness that made Zora's throat tight. He looked up, meeting her gaze, and in his eyes she saw a wisdom and a weariness far beyond his years. "It's over," he said softly. "We're safe now." And somehow, impossibly, Zara knew he was right. The Korgans were gone, not just from the ship but from the very fabric of space and time. The children had seen to that. They had won. In the days that followed, as the Nova Blitz limped its way to the nearest friendly port, Zara learned the truth. Learned of the children's plan, hatched in secret over the long weeks of their captivity. They had known, even then, that simply escaping the Korgans would never be enough. That as long as their tormentors existed, they would never truly be free. So they had bided their time, gathering their strength, waiting for the right moment, waiting for her. You were the catalyst, Jace told her, his hand small and warm in hers, the spark that lit the fire. Without you, we might never have found the courage to fight back. Zara shook her head, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. You would have, she said firmly. You're the bravest bunch of kids I've ever met. You didn't need me. But Jace only smiled, a smile that held a wisdom far beyond his years. Everyone needs someone, he said softly, even the bravest of us. And looking around at the children, at these small, fierce warriors who had saved not just themselves but the entire galaxy, Zara knew he was right. They had needed her, yes, but she had needed them too. Needed their courage, their resilience, their unwavering belief in the power of hope. They had saved each other. As the Nova Blitz set down on the lush green world that would become their new home, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wouldn't be easy, carving out a life here. There would be challenges, hardships, the ever-present specter of the past. But they would face it together, as a family. And in the end, that was all that mattered.